A new Sky News documentary called The Real Cost of Net Zero will tonight lift the lid on Australia's pursuit of a greener future. Our political contributor, Chris Uhlmann, will examine what Labor's commitment to achieving 82% renewables by 2030 and net zero emissions by 2050 really means for Australia. For a preview of the doco, I'm joined by the man himself, Chris Uhlmann. Chris, thanks so much for your time. I think this is one of the most important documentaries we've ever made here at Sky News, but what do you want people to get out of it when they watch it tonight?
I want people to understand what's really happening with the electricity grid and why the promise of a greener and cheaper future, and let's not forget that's what it was, that it would be greener and that it would be cheaper, was never going to happen, even at the time that it was promised. Because the cost of electricity is not set by the lowest cost of generation, it's set by the highest cost of generation. Wind and solar, when they're put into a grid at scale, leave massive supply gaps. Those supply gaps get filled by something. At the moment, the dominant source of generation is, of course, brown and black coal, a relatively cheap source of power over a long period of time. As they exit the marketplace, what's going to happen? Well, the price will more often be set by pumped hydro, as it is at the moment. In fact, most of the last quarter was set at major generators pumped hydro, or gas, another expensive option, or, guess what, batteries, the most expensive option of all if you discount using diesel generators, which we do in places like South Australia to keep the lights on. So what we're doing is actually preposterous, ridiculously expensive, and you could argue that it's not green because of the amount of land that's going to have to be given over to these occasional gatherers, these energy gatherers.
Not only that, the waste that wind and solar also produce, the minerals that still need to be dug out of the ground to produce and manufacture what is required to go into solar and wind as well. So, Chris, you've been asking these important questions for about 20 years in Canberra, perhaps even longer. How did we get to this point? How did we get to the point where that lie in politics that green is cheaper has just been able to filter through?
Well, I'm afraid I've come to the conclusion that the political class that is running us, and don't forget that both major parties in the end have signed up to net zero by 2050, are absolutely, completely energy illiterate. Your lifestyle is a product of the amount of energy you get to use. So the amount of energy that we burn to make heat to do work. That is where our lifestyle came from. I came past a sign today as I came into Parliament House which says coal kills kids. Well, I invite you to rewind to about 1900 when we had no electricity and look at the life expectancy of everybody then and look at the number of children who died in childbirth. You know, hydrocarbons are the thing that gave us the lifestyle that we have now, and we use them in all manner of ways. 80% of the world's primary energy still runs on hydrocarbons. We can want to wish this away if that's the case, but all that it means is that we will turn a rich society into a poor society, and other countries like China, which now burns 56% of the world's coal, and more coal was burned last year than has been burned in all of human history in a single year. It will get burned somewhere, just not here.
Yeah, that's right. We are resources rich. It should be the cheapest form of energy that we should be taking advantage of. Now, we're not saying at all, and your documentary is not saying don't pursue wind and solar at any level. Yes, it should be pursued, but it's all about diversification, isn't it? And one of the things that gets me is that, you know, gas for a long time was trumpeted as this important transition fuel. It's cleaner than coal, but somewhere along the way it was completely demonised. How did that happen?
Well, you can blame the Energy Minister for part of that because he went to not this COP, the latest Council of the Parties, which is the jamboree that we have where, you know, 70,000 odd people turn up on private jets to sort of talk to the world about climate change. Well, at the last one before this, he said that fossil fuel had no place in our energy system. So he combined coal and gas together to demonise the fuel. The Victorian government put a ban on the exploration for gas that's underneath its feet. And New South Wales did very little to assist the process. So essentially, we've created a domestic gas crisis. Now, I have seen a place in the world where the price of electricity is really quite cheap, comparatively speaking. That's in Texas. And why? It's got more wind and solar on its grid than California, but it has cheap and abundant gas. Because the other thing that happened while we were being lectured by the Biden administration in the United States about our coal exports is that the United States, because of fracking, grew to be the largest producer of oil in the world. Larger than Saudi Arabia, 20% of the world's oil, 25% of its natural gas. The United States is rich and powerful because it didn't do what it was saying it was going to do. So the question we have to ask ourselves, if China's not doing this, if the United States is not doing this, if India is not doing this, then what are we doing? And what is the cost of what we're doing?
Well, it's a really good question. We're going to find out in your documentary tonight.